My name's Ed Zachary, and I'm the director of the Medina County Veterans Service Office. I'm here to talk a little bit about what our office does and some of the benefits that you may or your family may be eligible for. First of all, people always ask, what does your office do? And I try to tell them that, in a nutshell, we take the veteran or the eligible family member, we take their need, and we try to plug in an agency that can solve that need either on a temporary or permanent basis. So whether it's financial assistance for a veteran who just lost his job and needs help making a mortgage payment, or whether it's a survivor's pension for a widow of a World War II veteran so that she can pay her medical bills, or whether it's simply Christmas dinner for a shut-in at Christmas time, we try to find the right benefit and the right agency that can help solve those problems. So we take the vet, the family member, what their need is, and we try to plug in some type of benefit or agency that will solve that problem. I do want to talk a little bit about the accreditations we hold, which makes us able to submit and prosecute claims on your behalf in front of the Department of Veterans Affairs. We hold 11 different accreditations. Those accreditations are very important to us, and we go through a lot of training to hold them. The American Legion, the American Red Cross, the American Veterans of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, which is AMVETS, the Disabled American Veterans, the Marine Corps League, the Military Order of the Purple Heart, the National Association of County Veteran Service Officers, the Ohio Department of Veterans Services, the Retired Enlisted Association, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and the Vietnam Veterans of America have all accredited us so that we can file claims on your behalf through those organizations to the Department of Veterans Affairs. And that's very important. If you're going to file a claim, you want to make sure that whoever you file it through holds an accreditation with the VA so that they can do your claim on your behalf. Some of the county benefits that come directly from Medina County is we provide transportation to and from the clinics that support Medina County. So we go to the Lewis Stokes VA Medical Center on University Circle every day. We go to the Parma Community-Based Outpatient Clinic in Parma and the Akron Community-Based Outpatient Clinic in Akron every day, leaves our office at 8 o'clock in the morning and returns after the last veteran has their appointment. We provide immediate financial assistance. We provide flag cases for deceased veterans of Medina County. We're a notary public in our office. We provide the veterans' burial markers out at the various cemeteries throughout the county that the flags go in during Memorial Day. We programmed with the Parma Vet Center to offer a vet center here in Medina County, which they do appointments twice a week off Medina Square at the professional building. That is psychiatric and psychology type counseling for veterans of combat and their families. And they do group sessions, individual sessions, and family sessions for our combat veterans of all eras. We do several records requests for people from various agencies, whether it's the Department of Defense or the National Personnel Records Center. We are able to electronically order those records. Again, I mentioned we're an accredited service office. And Medina County also provides a non-official Veterans Identification Card, which is available through the Medina County Recorder's Office. And we provide free transportation anywhere within the county on the Medina County Public Transit. One of the programs that's gotten a lot of attention in the past few years is ordering service medals, replacement sets for our veterans or their family members. So the government will issue a one-time replacement set of your medals or reissue medals that you haven't gotten. A lot of people like these to pass on to their grandchildren kind of as a memory of their service and things like that. So if you didn't get medals when you were discharged or you've lost them and would like a replacement set, come in. It's pretty simple. We fill out a packet with you, send it in, and in a few months you'll get your medals in the mail. I mentioned an immediate financial assistance program. In that program, the basics, we provide food, utilities, rent, and mortgage. So, if you're having problems and you meet the financial guidelines that we've established, we can usually help you 3 months out of the year as long as that financial need is there with your rent, your mortgage, your basic utilities and food. There are some other things that we can provide depending on the health needs of the individual. And that is for not just the veteran, but it can be for his surviving spouse, or eligible children. Basic eligibility is you have to be an honorably discharged veteran or on active duty or a surviving spouse. And there's some income guidelines and things that we would have to go through too. But feel free, if you think you need that help, to come into our office and fill out an application. We started July 1st of 2018. We started where you can ride the Medina County Transit anywhere in the county for free as long as you have that ID card from the recorder's office. So feel free to go get the ID card. You have to record your original discharge or a copy of your original discharge that you can get issued from the National Personnel Record Center at the recorder's office, which is a good thing to do, because then if you ever need another official copy, you don't have to reach out to the federal government. You can go to the recorder's office and they can give you an official copy. Take it down there, register it. They will issue you the ID card, and then you can use that ID card to ride the transit anywhere in the county for free. Some of the state benefits that's provided by the state of Ohio. They have various education benefits out there. One of them is the Ohio War Orphan Scholarship. Recently, the name was changed to the Ohio War Orphan Scholarship and Severely Disabled Veterans Scholarship. It provides people scholarships for their children if they're an orphan or if they are collecting a 60% or more service-connected disability from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Great benefit out there. Pays a huge amount of the tuition to the state schools and a various amount of monetary to private institutions throughout the state of Ohio. There are some requirements of how long you've lived in Ohio, where you were discharged from, where you went into the service from. There's also an Ohio Heroes program, which helps with home loans through the state of Ohio. There is some legal help through the Operation Legal Help Ohio for veterans in the state of Ohio. Most of that is dealing with maybe a claim with a landlord or something like that. They don't offer any divorce or family issue type help. There are various license plates out there eligible from the state of Ohio for some veterans, some at cost and some are free for our Military Order of Purple Heart or our Medal of Honor recipients. The Military Injury Relief Fund, often referred to as the MIRF, offers a $500 one-time stipend to those injured in either Iraq or Afghanistan. It is a one-time payment, and there is some paperwork and some proof that needs to be done that was an injury incurred while in service over there. Ohio also has a large depository of military records from either the Ohio National Guard or that's been sent to them over the years from the Department of Defense or the National Personnel Record Center. So we can do requests through the Ohio Department of Veterans Service Office sometimes to get those records faster than reaching out to the federal government. There is an Ohio Veterans Bonus. Currently it is paying for those serving in Afghanistan. Ohio has a long history of paying bonuses to our combat veterans all the way back to World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and then the Persian Gulf, and most recently the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Bonuses have been paid out to all of those veterans. Typically the bonus ends about a year after the conflict does. So unfortunately, if you haven't collected on it and that time period has lapsed, then you can't go back and try to collect on it. There's various recreation benefits available from the state of Ohio as far as camping, fishing license for our service-connected veterans at 100%, and things like that. The federal government also provides a one-time National Park Pass for those that are service-connected from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Just have to take down proof of your service connection and they'll issue you that pass, and it's good for the national parks throughout the country. There's some tax breaks in the state of Ohio also for veterans that are service-connected at the 100% rate under the Homestead Exemption Act. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Department of Veterans Affairs and the federal government and those benefits eligible to our veterans and their eligible family members. First of all, the Department of Veterans Affairs, although one large organization under the federal government, it actually has three sub-organizations. First is VHA, or the Veterans Health Administration. The Veterans Health Administration handles all the VA medical centers and health needs for our veterans. The second is the Veterans Benefits Administration, or the VBA. The VBA handles all the benefits that get paid out to our veterans. So whether it's a service-connected disability, a home loan, a pension, anything that's paid out, or educational benefits, that comes from the Veterans Benefits Administration. And then the last is NCA or the National Cemetery Administration. They run all the national cemeteries throughout the country, except for Arlington National Cemetery in Washington, D.C., which is run by the Department of the Army. So any kind of national cemetery that's out there, or state cemetery sometimes falls under the umbrella of NCA in some way, shape, or form with an agreement with that state. So when we talk about the VHA and the Veterans Health Administration, their main focus is running the hospitals and clinics throughout the country which service our veterans. There's over 1,000 healthcare facilities throughout the country and 170 hospitals. It is the largest healthcare organization in the world. So just grasp that. This is a huge medical conglomerate that is run by the federal government to serve our veterans. And what you get in one state may not be what you get in another state or in another area. There are some differences as to what's available in different areas, just based on, demographics and where the buildings are, and doctors and medical care in different agent areas. We fall under the VISN 10, which is the state of Ohio, and we have a VA hospital down in Cleveland, which services Medina County, and then the various clinics around the area like Parma, Lorain, Akron. There's one in Mansfield that various people from Medina County go to. We go to, as stated earlier, provide the transportation to the Akron, Parma, and Cleveland ones. They provide preventive care services such as immunizations, physical examinations. There's ambulatory outpatient and diagnostic treatment services, surgery, mental health, different things like that. Hospital inpatient services. If you go and have surgery at the VA hospital, it's a regular hospital, they will put you up there. There's long-term care services such as VA nursing home contracts with nursing homes out in the local community. And then there's domicile care and medical foster home care down at the VA hospital. There are some additional services for women, gender-specific health, geriatric evaluations for our seniors, telehealth, hospice, palliative care, hearing aids, glasses, anything you could expect from a regular hospital or medical center, the VA can provide to those veterans that are eligible. Eligibility is generally determined by your income or the service-connected disability. So I always tell people the two things that get you into the VA for health care purposes is either being under their income guidelines or a service-connected disability at least 10% or higher. Those veterans that served in Iraq or Afghanistan have free health care no matter what their income or service connection is for 5 years after getting out of the military. So they can, if they get out, they can go, as long as they served in one of those two theaters, they can go apply and they'll get the 5 years of free health care. I know the Mission Act, which some of you may or may not have heard, it was originally the Choice Act, which came into play a few years back. Then this last June 2019, the Mission Act was signed by the President to make health care a little more available for those veterans using the VA so that they could go to their doctors and their health care facilities within their community and the VA would pay for it. One of the key things I want veterans to know is they still need the authorization by the VA to do that. You just can't go to your doctor and then send the bill to the VA and expect them to pay it. You still have to get the permission from the VA to do that. And in some cases, it's becoming easier for them to do, and in some cases, it's not. It is a case-by-case basis. That is decisions that come from the VA medical staff, not our offices. We're a county office. What we do in the realm of health care for veterans is we do all the paperwork and applications to apply for that health care. We also help them with some of the billing sometimes because the billing can be very confusing, and sometimes we help them straighten that out through different resources that we have at the VA. So the access to care is becoming easier for veterans. They can go to the VA Medical Center, they can request in-home health care from the VA Medical Center, the VA will contract that health care to come out if they need it. If they're service connected at a certain part, sometimes the VA will pay for their nursing home. Sometimes if they need a surgery, maybe it's an orthopedic procedure, They can tell the VA, hey, it's easier for me to go in my community and have this done. Can you outsource it to the community? And the VA will make that decision as to whether they do or not. One of the things that's important is the billing from the VA. Everything is not free. There's different tiers that you fall under in the VA. There's 8 different priority groups that you'll fall under. Each of them have different co-payments. Some of them have no co-payments at all. But if you go to an outside source, your local hospital, and maybe it's an emergency room visit, it doesn't necessarily mean the VA is going to pay that. And there was something signed in 2001 called the mill bill, which affects how the VA can pay those bills or not pay those bills. So that's just one of the things. I don't want a veteran to think that, hey, everything is covered by the VA. The VA is not insurance. It is a healthcare system. And that's important, discriminator there to understand. When we talk about in-home healthcare, and people always ask me, why should I sign up for the VA? I got great insurance from, maybe one of the companies I retired from. Most insurances will not pay for in-home healthcare. And the VA will pay for either skilled home healthcare or non-skilled healthcare. They contract it through local providers in your community. It is a medical decision that your doctor at the VA makes and says, yes, you need 2 hours, or yes, you need 6 hours a day, 4 days a week or 5 days a week. It is based on his medical expertise. But it can help offset the cost of you paying for someone out of pocket. So I tell people, if you can enroll in the VA healthcare, do so. Maintain that eligibility, even if you still use your other insurance along with it. Maintain that eligibility so when it comes time for some of the service that the VA has that maybe your insurance can't provide, then you can easily, get those services and have them used on yourself. Because if you're not enrolled in the VA and you need that service, it becomes much more difficult to get at that point, because maybe we can't get you to the VA, maybe you're already homebound or something like that. Just real quick, up there on the slides, you'll see the different income levels that make you eligible or ineligible for the VA. There's a national threshold, and then there is also a demographic threshold, which goes county to county. So every county may be different. So for like our snowbirds that go down to Florida, the zip code you're at down there, the eligibility may be different than the zip code up here. So sometimes you want to look at that as to where you want to apply. But it is income-based or based on your service-connected disability. And since I mentioned service-connected disability so much, I want to talk a little bit about that. Disability from the VA is a tax-free monetary benefit. It's paid to those veterans that incurred a disability due to disease, injury, or presumptiveness while in the service. So you had to incur it while in service, and there's got to be a connection. Pays at different rates, from 0% to 100% disabled. And it could be for just about anything that happened to you in service that you still have a disability for. There's 5 ways to get service-connected disability. The first is direct service connection. I broke my leg in the service and I still have a problem walking and limping. That's direct service connection. There's proof in the service that I broke my leg and I still have a disability from it, and the doctor says so. Could be secondary service connection, which means I have a disease such as type 2 diabetes, which is service connected because I got it in the service, and I've now developed peripheral neuropathy in my legs, which is due to the diabetes. So that is secondary. It's caused by something that I'm already service connected for. Could be a presumed service connection, or presumptive, as they talk about. The biggest ones here are with our Vietnam veterans and the presumptiveness of different diseases due to the Agent Orange exposure. So various diseases are presumed. If you have type 2 diabetes, ischemic heart disease, and the list goes on and on, as to the different diseases which are presumed. If you have one of those and you served in Vietnam, then it's automatic that that disease is service connected due to your service over there. Could be aggravation of a pre-existing injury. I broke my knee playing football in high school. It healed. I went into the service, and now my knee hurts because of my time in the service, and I have arthritis or whatever it could be in that knee. So it aggravated a pre-existing injury. At that point, the VA will evaluate where you were when you went into the service with that injury and how much your military service disabled you from that point. And then there is what's called a 38 U.S.C. 1151 claim, service connection due to injury caused by treatment at a VA healthcare center. And those are the 5 different ways to get service connection. How do you determine or not the disability is caused in service? The veteran needs a disability, he needs an in-service event or presumptiveness, and I need what's called a legal nexus, the connection of those two. Again, the best example I can use is I have arthritis in my knee and I'm starting to walk with a limp and it hurts. I broke my knee in service and there's proof of that in the documents, and my doctor says that my injury today is caused from that break, and that's the medical evidence or the legal nexus to connect the two. And that's what you need to get service connection. I talked a little bit about the presumptiveness for the Vietnam veteran, and recently there is a House Resolution 299 which passed, and this president signed into law this past year. It is effective January of 2020. It makes our Blue Water Navy, those folks that served on ships outside of Vietnam, 12 nautical miles of the baseline shore, and there's a bunch of different, areas and things like that, but pretty much 12 miles from the baseline of the shore. It makes their service presumptive for those same diseases that our Vietnam veterans that served on the ground are. That's huge change, because over the past several years, since the Vietnam Agent Orange Act fell into play, those that served on our blue water ships or our deep water ships out in the ocean, no matter how close they were to shore, were not eligible for that presumptiveness. So this law has changed that. So if you feel as though that you were a Blue Water Navy during the Vietnam War and you were within that 12 nautical mile, and there's some things that we got to go through to prove that, and you have one of those presumptive diseases, then you want to come talk to somebody like me so we can do the claim for you and get you the service connection that you deserve. And service connection doesn't just pay a monetary amount. It gets you into the VA healthcare system and adds different benefits for you and your family in some cases. Some of the other benefits that are paid by the Veterans Benefits Administration are what's called total disability and individual unemployability. If you are disabled and service connected for it, and that disability stops you from being able to hold down a gainful job, then we can apply for this and it'll pay at a different rate so that you can live, and since you can't be employed because of your service-connected disability. Concurrent retirement and disability payments, CRDP, and then there's combat-related special compensation, CRSC. Those are for our veterans that are retired from the military and also collecting service-connected disability so that they don't lose any of their retirement and that money gets put back into their retirement pay and they can collect both checks. There's home loan guarantees which help veterans buy homes that may not have the down payments available to most people so that they can still buy a home. There's adaptive equipment for vehicles, adaptive home loans and grants for our disabled veterans so that they can adapt their house and be able to stay in a home and live there. Maybe they're wheelchair bound and the counters need to get lowered. Maybe they need to change their bathrooms. Some of those adaptations are paid through the Veterans Benefits Administration because of your service connected. And then some of those are also available at the Veterans Healthcare through your doctor. So it's another reason why you'd want to apply for healthcare, because maybe you need grab bars and the VA medical centers can provide those and someone come out to do those. Maybe it's a ramp going up into your house. And then there's obviously the education benefits, which everyone's known since the GI Bill came into play after World War II. It helped educate hundreds of thousands of veterans and pretty much build this country with the educated force of veterans that we have today. And then there's different life insurance policies from the time you are in the service to the time you get out of the service or establish a disability with the VA. So one of the questions I'm always asked is, why is my friend getting more money than me? And I tell everybody that service-connected disabilities are individual basis, although the laws and rules apply to everybody across the board. So sit down with somebody that's accredited, knows the rules and laws for applying for a disability through the VA, and see where you're at. Go through the rating schedule and see where you should be at and where it comes back as. Don't just try to judge your claim based off of what your neighbor or your friend is getting. And that pretty much covers our compensation portion for the VA, the Department of Veterans Affairs. One of the things I do want to talk about real quick before we get into pensions is a benefit that is paid to widows of veterans. It's called Dependency and Indemnity Compensation, or in short terms we call it DIC. DIC is paid to those veterans' widows who were either service-connected at the 100% rate for 10 years or more, or passed away due to a service-connected disability. It pays at a much lower rate than what the veteran was getting. But let's say I'm collecting for a heart problem. I'm service-connected for a heart problem, and the VA is paying me for that disability. And I have a heart attack and pass away. My spouse is eligible for this benefit then. So that's important. Now let's say that I pass away from that same disease, but I wasn't service-connected, but it's on a presumptive list from going back 10 or 15 years. She can still apply for that service-connected death and be eligible for this. If I was 100% service-connected for 10 years, then it's automatic she will get it, or he will get it, the spouse of the veteran. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about survivors' pensions, or non-service connected pensions for our veterans. The benefit is basically the eligibility the same for whether it's a veteran or a survivor. It's just the rates are different. It is a needs-based benefit paid to honorably discharged wartime veterans, had to serve during a period of war, not in the war, but during a period of war, even for just one day, and then there are some other service requirements depending on when you served. The different types of pensions that are paid are either three different types of eligibility. Housebound, standard pension, or aid and attendance, as a lot of people have heard because it's marketed by a lot of different people out there in the senior businesses. The first one is for maybe someone that's indigent or low income or maybe disabled not due to their service and isn't eligible for Social Security. If you're homebound due to that disability and you can't get out of the house, then it is increased a bit. For a single veteran, a little over $16,000. For a veteran with a dependent, a little over $20,000. And for the surviving spouse, a little over $11,000. So that's what we consider the homebound rate. And then there's the highest rate, which is the aid and attendance. Typically, if you're living in an assisted living, a nursing home, have in-home health care coming in, we can apply for the aid and attendance. And it pays the highest rates for a single veteran over $22,000 a year, for a veteran with a dependent $26,000 a year, and for the surviving spouse $14,000. Now a lot of you may have heard of the aid and attendance benefit. It's actually called non-service connected pension or survivor's pension with aid and attendance. A lot of people have heard this through different senior marketing groups that are trying to help people move into an assisted living or provide in-home health care. We advise everybody that if you think you're eligible for this, just sit down and talk to us and go through your income, your assets, and your medical expenses, because all three of those things come into play when we start talking about these pensions. How much money or investments do you have? How much income do you have? And how much do you pay out in out-of-pocket medical expenses? That formula all gets put together to determine how much you'll be paid by the Department of Veterans Affairs if you're eligible. Income is a huge factor, and probably the one that comes into play most. Everything is considered income for the Department of Veterans Affairs, even non-taxable income. So IRA distributions, your dividends, your interest, your Social Security, pensions is all considered income by the VA. Insurance dividends even can be considered income by the VA. So all those things come into play when we're talking about a non-service connected or a survivor's pension. Net worth is a factor, and the net worth is right now at about $127,000. When we talk about net worth, it takes your stocks, bonds, mutual funds, bank accounts, IRA distributions, anything that would be considered wealth. It does not count the home you live in, your primary residence. There is some property requirements as far as acreage goes, It will count in additional house. So if you own a condo in Florida and you own a home here, you have to pick one as far as your primary residence, and then the other one will be factored into net worth. So there are some things that are factored in and some things that aren't. And that's why we advise you to sit down and talk to somebody that is accredited with the Department of Veterans Affairs and knows what they're doing when you're filling out these applications. One of the things that is not counted is a trust for a disabled child. So even if you have $1 million, if you have a disabled child and you want to put that into that trust for that child that's disabled, you can do that. But other trusts may be counted. In this slide, you can see that it talks about your net worth plus your income minus your annual medical expenses that you pay out of pocket factors into your calculated net worth. And, some of these slides are a little bit misleading as far as to what kind of income you need and what kind of net worth you need. And that's why, again, we advise people to sit down and talk to us as far as, whether you're eligible or not eligible. The VA recently started a 36-month look-back period. Right now, it doesn't go back 36 months. It goes back to October of 2018 when the law changed. And it will just keep spanning out until it does compose that whole 36-month period. So that's something to take into consideration. I always show this slide up here with the little guy with the money around his head to people. And really, it's something to just not use in your calculations, but to grasp at the difficulty and the complexity of figuring out if you're eligible for a pension program. But the one takeaway I want you to take away from this slide is if you do go on Medicaid, if you're in a nursing home and you're collecting a full VA pension at maybe $1,600 a month, and you go on Medicaid and Medicaid starts paying those bills, that pension will drop to $90 a month, which is in addition to the $50 you get from Social Security. But it will drop to the $90. And that's the one takeaway I want you to take away from this slide. Again, I can't stress it enough that if you're interested or you think you're eligible for a non-service connected pension or survivor's pension, to come and talk to me or someone like me that is accredited at one of your county veteran service officers. That pension can also, in limited cases, be eligible for children that have been disabled since birth or prior to the age of 18, no matter how old they are. Or children that are still in college under the age of 24. It can be eligible to parents in some cases. The parental pensions are based on income and how much money they're getting as to what it pays. And it pays at much different rates than it does the spouse or the veteran. So that's something else that if you think you're eligible for, maybe you want to sit down and talk to us. The next thing I want to talk a little bit about is the National Cemetery Administration, or NCA. And remember I said the VA's divided up into those three groups: the VHA, Veterans Health Administration, VBA, Veterans Benefits Administration, and the NCA, National Cemetery Administration. The NCA honors veterans and their families with final resting places throughout the country, whether it's a national cemetery or a portion of a state cemetery that they've partnered up with that state to provide burial for our veterans. It goes all the way back to 1862 after the Civil War, when they started to start national cemeteries because of the soldiers that were killed during that war. Today, there is about 3.5 million grave sites in national cemeteries nationwide. The burial benefits that you may be eligible for from the Department of Veterans Affairs are burial in that national cemetery, a government headstone marker or medallion from the VA, a burial flag, a presidential memorial certificate signed by the current president, or burial allowances. Those are the 5 things that the VA either provides or pays out to our veterans as far as burial services. So who's eligible for burial in a national cemetery? Members of the armed forces, veterans, certain reservists and National Guard members, depending on when and how they served, typically had to be activated by the federal government, not the state, spouses and dependents, and there's others, such as people that work for NASA in certain capacities, certain political figures in Congress, things like that. What services do they provide at a national cemetery? They provide a burial plot, the opening and closing of the grave, the headstone or marker, a concrete grave liner, and perpetual maintenance. So all that is provided by the National Cemetery. So once you're, and I try to, the easiest way to describe it is once you're in the gates of the National Cemetery, everything there is provided for free. Everything prior to that, the casket, the funeral, the preparations, all that is still has to be paid for by the family. So people ask, how can I prepare in advance? Well, the form, VA Form 41007 is a pre-need determination for eligibility to be buried in a national cemetery. So you can simply come into our office, we'll fill that form out, and they will send it back to you and say, you're eligible from this point on to be buried in that cemetery unless the circumstances change, like you commit a capital crime or something like that. So this is great for people to plan because we've had people that thought they were eligible in the past and they weren't. And you know, when a loved one passes, that's not the time to try to figure out where they're going to be buried at. So this form has come in very handy. Feel free to come in, we'll fill it out, send it in. They send it back in a few months and say, yes, you're eligible, or no, you're not eligible. You cannot reserve space in the cemetery, though. They will simply say, you're eligible to be buried in a national cemetery somewhere in the United States. If the cemetery nearest you closes up before your death or gets full, then you're going to have to move on to another cemetery. And that's important to know. So there's different burial option sites. There is in-ground, above-ground columbarium, and a scattered ground. So caskets are only in the ground. Cremation is either in-ground, above ground, in the columbarium, or in a scatter garden. And all of those sites are available at our Western Reserve National Cemetery down in Rittman, Ohio. Headstones and markers, you can apply for those for typically private cemeteries. There's various types. The cemetery that you are going to use, if you're going to use a private cemetery and you want to get a headstone or a marker from the VA, that cemetery does have to sign off on whether they will accept that stone. Some cemeteries will not allow upright stones. Some cemeteries require that the brass markers be mounted on a slab of concrete, and that cemetery may or may not charge you extra for that slab of concrete. But they're all provided by the Department of Veterans Affairs for eligible veterans. One of the recent things in the past few years that the VA did was they made these medallions, which come in 3 different sizes, 1.5 inch all the way up to 5 inch, with the Veterans Branch of Service on it, and it looks like a little folded flag. So if you've already got a veteran that is buried and has a headstone that wasn't provided by the Department of Veterans Affairs, you can apply for this little medallion. It comes with some epoxy, comes in the mail, you take it out, clean the tombstone off, and put it on there. And that way, the sexton or whoever is running the cemetery at Memorial Day knows that that veteran or that person buried in that plot is a veteran, to put a flag there. These are for any cemetery nationwide, so you can order them for your loved ones, and they will provide the medallion. Here in the Medina County, we provide from the county those bronze markers which go in the ground also, so that's something to remember. The burial flag is also provided at time of death during the funeral. Typically, every funeral home that I've ever dealt with knows where to get the burial flags from, either the post office or the local VA. And there is a one-time, one flag issue per family. So sometimes families will request a second flag. They're only eligible for one flag. So that's one thing to remember. There's also the Presidential Memorial Certificate, which is signed by the current president, which is eligible. You can get as many of these as you'd like. So if you'd like one for the spouse, the children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, you can ask for as many of those, and they will give you, I have never heard of them not saying they wouldn't give you so many, upwards of 25 to 30 of them. So that's kind of the eligibility for burial in the National Cemetery. One of the questions I always get is, can mom be buried with dad in the National Cemetery? And as long as mom didn't divorce dad, or vice versa, depending on who is the veteran, they are eligible to be buried in the National Cemetery along with that veteran. So spouses, dependent children under the age of 18, or disabled children that were disabled before they 18 are all eligible to be buried at the National Cemetery with the veteran. Now, burial allowances, which is different than burial at the National Cemetery. Burial allowances come in a couple different forms, and they pay a monetary benefit due to a service-connected disability from the VA. And I tell people, if you're not collecting money from the VA, then there is no burial allowance, no monetary benefit paid out for the burial. So for a service-connected death because of a service-connected disability, the VA will pay out $2,000. For a non-service-connected death, they pay out $3,000 for the burial allowance and $762 for the plot allowance after a certain date. I mean, you can see those dates up on the slides there. That pretty much sums up our presentation today. Whether it's a county benefit provided to you by Medina County, whether it's a benefit from the state of Ohio, or a benefit from the Department of Veterans Affairs, such as service-connected compensation, a non-service-connected or survivor's pension, or a benefit for burial or burial in a national cemetery provided by the National Cemetery Administration. One of the things I do want to warn you about or make you aware of before we end this program is things to be aware of in certain scams out there. There are a lot of people trying to make money off of our veterans today, whether it's collecting money, selling you something, or simply trying to do a bait and switch on whatever they're trying to promote. So just be aware. The aid and attendance benefit, there's a lot of people that are using that to market their sales of their industry. And that's not wrong or right. I just want people to be aware that you can always come to someone like me and we provide that service for free. You should never have to pay to get anything from the Department of Veterans Affairs. It should be free in almost every circumstance. Discharges, or DD-214s, we've seen where people have been charged several $100s in some cases to get a copy of their discharge, which in most cases, if you need it for a federal, state, or county benefit, we can get it for free. We can get it just as fast, if not faster, than anyone else is going to order it. So you shouldn't have to pay for that discharge. The only time you should ever have to pay for someone's discharge if it's older than 60 years old and you purely want it for genealogical purposes or historical family records. That is the only time you should ever have to pay for it. And typically if you reach out to the National Personnel Record Center, you will pay less than if you go through a third party. Funeral homes, and I've seen where funeral homes are certified and they try to sell grave liners, extra grave liners for the National Cemetery. And when a loved one passes away, we're probably at our worst. And to reach out and say, well, hey, you need a better grave liner than the one the federal government provides, and charge them an exorbitant amount of thousands of dollars for something that just isn't needed. So just think about the extra money if you're burying a loved one in the National Cemetery. The grave liners are state of the art. They're the same grave liner that you would get in a private cemetery. So there's no need to pay that extra amount of money for something that you really don't need. We've seen coupons that people sell, solicitors going door to door. Just what I tell people is if you don't know the person you're giving your money to, then don't give it to them. There's a lot of nonprofit, local veterans organizations here in Medina County, probably one in your local community, that can use your donations. So just make sure that your money is going to someone that you know and going to something that you want it to go to. And I can't stress that enough. There's been a war going on for almost 20 years now, and there's a lot of people that will play on that because they know that the public wants to help our veterans and our service members. So just be careful with your money. I hope that today I was able to clear up some of the misconceptions of what our office does and what the benefits are available to Medina County and our residents from the county, from the state of Ohio, and from the federal government. Obviously, I didn't cover all the benefits available. If you have any questions at any time, please feel free to reach out to us by phone call or stopping in the office to discuss what you may or may not be eligible for. We'll be happy to set up an appointment to talk to one of our counselors or our service officers and discuss anything that you may think we can help you with. And again, I want to thank you for this time and thank you for your service.